is his first big speech for many, many weeks. Across the country, patients are still in need and often failing to get the care that they need.
We are joined now by someone in that situation, Matthew Simpson. Now, Matthew's wife, Teresa, died at the end of November after they waited around 16 hours for an ambulance to take care of her.
We're also joined by Dr Peter Neville, a consultant gastroenterologist who says the NHS is on the verge of collapse. But, Matthew, we'd very much like to begin with you if we can. Let's just very quickly, in a sentence, summarise the timeline of events here. You were very concerned about your wife and you called an ambulance at 3 in the afternoon. Heard nothing until 6 o'clock when you get a call back to ask how she's doing. You then sit up with her until 3 in the morning when eventually you fall asleep and you wake up at about 7:30, about 16 hours later, and she's in a very bad way. So you call the ambulance service again and this time they come, but it's too late. Can you explain to us, in your own words, why you are so crystal clear that it was that 16-hour delay that led directly to the premature death of your beloved wife?
Well, my wife was still communicating with me for 12 hours from the 3 a.m. till the 3 p.m. to the 3 a.m. She was still communicating with me. I was asking if she was OK. I was giving her drinks. She was still communicating all that time in that 12 hours before she fell asleep.
Matthew, that first call to the emergency services came at just before 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And the emergency care line said, we'll call an ambulance, and did. But 3 hours later, you got a call back from Yorkshire Ambulance Service. Now, did they say that they were concerned and they were going to send out an ambulance, or did they warn you that the delays were so long that they didn't know when an ambulance could come out to see your wife?
Well, and they rang at 6 o'clock and they wanted to speak to my wife, so I told them she was confused, but I ended up putting the phone next to my wife's ear and they was asking her questions. They was asking her the year she was born, the month she was born, and then when it came to the day she was born, she kept on saying August, and they asked her 3 times and she just said August for August. So I took the phone off her and I said, look, I said, I've been with my wife, we've been married for 24 years. I know my wife, this isn't like her. She's not confused like this. So they were still asking questions. They asked me to ask her if she could smile, so she smiled at me and everything like that. So a couple of minutes later, they said they would send an ambulance, but they said they couldn't give me a time limit because they was extremely busy. But if a condition got worse, to ring them back. But her condition never got worse. She stayed the same all the way through.
Yeah, it stayed the same all the way through until 12 hours later, the ambulance eventually comes. And the trouble is, from reading the notes, Matthew, you woke up in the middle of the night and realised that she was cold. I mean, you know, she was in a desperate state by that time of the morning, wasn't she? And you must have been absolutely petrified.
Yes, she was.
Yeah, the fact of the matter is, clearly, you believe if the ambulance had come out to look after your wife when she was in her confused state, and bearing in mind your wife suffered a muscle-wasting disease and had diabetes, so her confused state was obviously something that should have been responded to very quickly as you tried to. You believe that if the ambulance had come out in that first couple of hours, she would still be alive.
Yes, I do believe that. I believe that 100%, because she was still communicating with me. So if they came out within like a 6 hours time limit, they would have checked and they realised that maybe her sugar level had dropped and sorted her out, and then they would have took her in and she would have been in hospital getting a medical attention. And if she had an heart attack, she would have been on a heart monitor and got seen to straight away. I believe that the ambulance service killed my wife. And she would still be here today if she got the medical help.
Matthew, it doesn't seem that long ago to any of us that when we picked up the phone and dialled 999, an ambulance was there within a few minutes. Those days are clearly gone. You had to wait 16 hours. Were you ever given a specific reason for the delay?
No, I still don't know. I still don't know to this day that why the delay is. Actually, I've made a complaint to the Yorkshire Ambulance, which is now gone up to a serious inquest now. So that's going to take 12 months before I get any answers. I just want answers. Why did someone decide that my wife's confusion wasn't an emergency? Who makes these decisions? It's wrong.
Well, let's hope you have a
I've lost my wife, my best friend, and my soulmate.
Well, let's hope you have a coroner at that inquest who asks the right questions. Let's turn to Dr. Peter Neville now. Sorry, do carry on.
I would just want to read that we do have a statement, Matthew, from Yorkshire Ambulance Service NHS Trust. And it says, first and foremost, our thoughts are with Mr Simpson on the sad loss of his wife, Teresa, and we offer him our sincere condolences. Our patient relations team has received correspondence from Mr Simpson raising concerns about our response to this incident. They will liaise directly with Mr Simpson about specific details relating to this.
So they're reserving their position, aren't they?
Yeah, and there's clearly an inquiry, a very important inquiry underway because, you know, we can hear from your response to what happened and people can understand you feel very, very strongly about this and the loss of your wife is clearly very, very painful for you, Matthew, and, you know, our condolences are with you as well. Because,
as we say, from everything you say, it was premature. She should still be with you. Well, let's now turn to Dr Neville. What do you think, listening to that story, Dr Neville?
Hello, yes. I'm so sorry to hear about Mr Simpson's experience. It's a shocking and terribly sad story. Clearly, I can't comment on the individual case, no. But obviously, as a general principle in medicine, if somebody is sick, then it is in their interests to receive treatment as soon as possible, and any delay can influence the outcome. And obviously, a significant delay, such as Mr Simpson described, it's certainly conceivable that it will have had a bad effect on the outcome of whatever illness it was that she was suffering from. It's a terrible shame.
How do you think we've got to the position that I sort of outlined 2 or 3 minutes ago, where just 2 or 3 years ago, we all accepted that if we picked up the phone in extremis and dialed 999, an ambulance would arrive pretty sharpish? It was just a given in this country. How have we got to a position where we listen to stories like that? What's your analysis of what's gone wrong?
It's a really good question. I think there's several factors, and it's not all straightforward. We're talking about crisis. The NHS has been lurching in and out of crises, actually, for the past 5 or 6 years. Journalists like to talk about winter crises, but actually everybody working in the NHS recognises now that a winter crisis actually lasts 12 months. We're never out of it. There is always queues in A&E. There are always queues outside. Obviously, when you have a bout of respiratory infections, we've got triple respiratory infections going around at the moment. We have COVID-19, we have flu, and we have respiratory syncytial virus, all causing an impact on the populations. And when you have a triple whammy like that, of course it tips us over the edge. But it's not true to say that this epidemic is solely responsible for the problem, because it's been brewing for years.
Peter Neville, you put on Twitter a very important series of points that gives an insight into this crisis. I just want to reflect on what Matthew Simpson said. You know, very, very strong words there from somebody who has lost his, the love of his life, has to spend Christmas without her. Now, obviously, it is not the intention of any members of staff that was the outcome. Mm. You know,
of course not.
Nobody wants nobody sets out to deliver bad care. But these delays are giving, a lot of people cause for concern. Nobody wants to be in a situation where they believe that delay directly led to the death of a family member.
Absolutely not. I mean, there are several key factors here. I think the first thing to say, which I mentioned in my tweet, is that the Royal Colleges have published data on the fact that throughout the UK, about 25 to 40%, depending on area and hospital, of hospital beds are occupied by patients who are actually fit to go home. Mm. The reason they're stuck in hospital is because they are awaiting council social care packages to enable us to discharge them safely. Now, Social care is in the hands of the council, is not in the hands of the NHS. And what it means is effectively our hospitals are 30% of our bed capacity is occupied by patients who don't need to be there and actually would benefit from not being there. It is not a place. Hospital is not a place for people who don't need to be there. It is noisy. There's a lot of activity. You can't sleep. And there's a lot of people with infectious diseases around. So we're not getting these people home. And that's a function of council care, yes. A lack of social workers and a lack of council funding. That's really important. If that was dealt with, that would clear up 2 or 3 wards in every hospital and enable us to deal with these terrible backlogs of people sitting in A&E. And the reason that the ambulances are struggling, of course, is because they can't deposit the patients in A&E, because A&E is rammed with people in chairs and trolleys, sitting in corridors or sitting in waiting rooms, sometimes for hours and hours and hours.
And that's across the country. Peter, sorry to interrupt you, Peter Neville, but we're almost out of time. You are a doctor, not a politician, but this is a sort of political question, but I'm sure you have a view on it because your thread has thousands of likes and retweets as you muse upon these dilemmas and problems facing the NHS. What's your feeling this morning to hear that the Prime Minister's first big speech for many, many weeks, a keynote speech, is not about this, but it's about the importance of learning mathematics, going on to 18 at school? What's your reaction to that?
Well, it's baffling to me. It's a profound non sequitur. It doesn't seem to bear any relationship to the problems that we're encountering in the NHS. And certainly, one of the key reasons I posted the tweet, there were 2 key reasons I posted the tweet. One was to try and educate people. Journalists have written, there's nothing I've said in my tweet that I think is new. What I try to do is just put things together and explain how the problems intermesh. I think that we do have a crisis in the NHS, but it's not necessarily down to primarily NHS funding. A lot of it's down to social care funding. I think nurses and paramedical professions have had significant effective cuts in pay over the last 12 years, and I think they are struggling. And I think that rectification needs to be made in that area. The problem with NHS is not necessarily primarily money, it's workforce. We have massive amounts of unfilled posts. People do not want to work here at the moment because the environment is poor and people are leaving and taking early retirement. And that will continue until the environment changes. The environment needs to change.
And also, I mean, obviously, Matthew's suffered the worst loss. What we must be very careful of is that we don't blame individual paramedics, ambulance. They are in the front line of dealing with people who are at the end of their tether, as well as needing to provide them with care. We just had a couple of comments. Alice said, please, can we not make ambulance service villains? It's horrible what's happened. But the ambulance service is so underfunded and understaffed due to the government. Please don't blame the ambulance workers. And James says it's complete government negligence over an extended period of time, not the ambulance service fault. I mean, Matthew, it's a horrible situation for you to be in. But, let's hope the investigation into your wife's death can mean that nobody else is in a similar situation waiting that long. We appreciate both of your company and time this morning, and our best wishes to both of you as you deal with what you're going through.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Matthew.